American history. And so if you go on the YouTube and check your check the videos, it might just have, if you're on your phone, it just has a list of my most recent videos on my channel. At least that's what I understand, that's the way it is. So you have to make sure you're going to the AP US History one. Because I had a couple people watch the one about Egyptian culture.
I caught myself getting into one of those and I was like, yeah, no, this isn't right.
Yeah, this is a little odd, yeah. So make sure you check the name, because I do teach 3 different classes. And I did collect the notes. And so most of you have turned it in, I've noticed. I've graded a lot of them. So I will go through and check and make sure you did. That's my reward for you doing it. And also, it's been a kind of a point of emphasis. I want to make sure that you are doing something on Wednesday. And I thought that's a good way to not only make sure you're doing something, but also reward you. Yeah.
I thought we were turning them in physically today, Wednesday nights. Were we supposed to take a picture of them?
You can take a picture, or if you want to turn them in on Wednesday, I'll just check them real fast.
Okay.
Let me do it right at the end of the class, okay? Because I want you to keep them. I don't want you to that's why the picture was good, because you can still have the notes and stuff.
Sorry.
It's fine. Not a big deal. I'll get it, and I'll give you the points. Don't worry about it.
Thank you.
And the big thing about that one is I could just make you check in or do something like that, but I want to reward you. I think that's important. And, the test will be a lot harder. So I want to, for some of you, if it hits you as a shock, you have a points build up. And for others, that it doesn't hit you as a shock, it'll be just gravy. Okay, something else I was going to tell you. How you doing?
I'm all right. How about you?
Okay, so number 1. Just some reason. I gotta wear a mask. What else do I need? Oh, I should add that the masks are working. It appears as though schools that have masks are not transmitting the disease near as much as schools that did not go through the precaution. And that is really good news, because masks are the key. Washing hands and all that's important, but it's masks. And if we keep wearing the mask, maybe we can go back to at least probably wear a mask at normal classes if this trend continues. And that would be online horrible. I think it's awful. It's tough for me. I know it's hard on you. Fingers crossed. It might be January, but fingers crossed. Yeah.
So would it be like we go Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and not Wednesday?
Yeah, that was the original idea.
It could, see, this is all still, it's working, so that could be, there's 2 different ways to do it. It could be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday off, or they might go all the way just 5 days a week, but just everyone wear masks. That would be just better. I know that when we had to go home at first, I don't have to go to school, it's home, it's great. That ended real quick, didn't it? All right, so number 1. The Egyptian god Isis was, number 1, what kind of people made up the Tories? The Tories. That was a party in Britain, so you can have your notes out. What kind of group made up the Tories? And I gave you a few different explanations. So just, like they were from this area, or what class, or what they became known as. Any one of those will work. I'm trying not to trick you. I'm trying to make it very basic. Number 2. During Pontiac's Rebellion, or Pontiac's War, who were the militia in western Pennsylvania that took out their anger on various peaceful tribes in western Pennsylvania? Lancaster, Massachusetts was the best known one. What were the name of those militia? So we're talking 1760. Yeah, so this is probably on Tuesday's notes?
Yes, Tuesdays.
Yeah.
It's like the first thing we talk about.
We don't have them. Number 3. What happened to the value of specie, or hard money? That's coins. What happened to the value in the colonies after the Currency Act? What happened to the value? So either a couple word explanation or the word that describes what happened. Either one of those work.
Do you know what day that was?
That's probably Tuesday also. Isn't
Yeah.
it?
End of Tuesday.
Number 4. What group would enforce the boycott during the Stamp Act crisis? What's the name of the group? Enforcing the boycott. Enforcing the boycott. Number 6.
Yep.
What happened to question 5? That's the question for 6. What happened? Tell me a story. Well, there's a storm and a dark. Number 5. What 17th century law, specifically the 1650s, what laws were the British trying to resurrect with the Sugar Act and the Townshend Acts? What laws? They kept trying to bring back these mercantile laws with the Sugar Act, the Townshend Act, even the Tea Act. They kept bringing them back. Part of it, they would cut the taxes from them and try to enforce them. They just kept doing it time after time after time. So I've mentioned them a lot. And last, and for the second time, question 6. What was the most effective weapon the colonists had to fight British colonial policy? So what was their most effective weapon to fight British laws? What did the colonies do that worked? Yes.
Can you do question 5 again? Sorry.
But everyone got 6? Everyone heard it? Okay, question 5. What were the laws from the 17th century, British mercantile laws, that they kept trying to resurrect? With the Sugar Acts, the Townshend Acts, the Tea Acts. There's the wholesale laws, and I refer to them as, no, but the name I refer to them as. I don't know how to say it. Would you like a bonus question?
Yes.
Yesterday in class. So yesterday I was online. I told you a story about what John Adams called those people around the Boston Massacre. Do you remember the name that he gave for what we would say juvenile delinquents?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that name? Would also make a some kind of band.
I heard it on the thing now, but
Oh, very Shakespeare.
It is. Any other repeats? Raise your hand. Anything else? Yes.
number 4.
I gotta move. Number 4. What group would enforce the boycott of the Stamp Act? So they'd rough up the people who tried to buy British goods. Number 6. The most effective weapon against the British policy. Tarring and feathering. No, that's only part of it.
I think we should bring back targeting.
It'd be fun at assemblies.
I said we bring it back.
Just kind of random people.
What's a lot? Put the names.
I might go.
That's gonna
What?
be the new trend. I swear. 2021. Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Better than that.
It's coming back. It's killing.
Yeah, I like that.
That'd be so sick.
I would definitely go to assemblies. Man. All right.
Let's go to a rally.
Are we good? Do we got them? I know some parts we've had. I try to keep them very basic. I don't try to trick you, but I know sometimes the way I might ask it might seem a little complex to you. I'm not trying to. All right. Get your last thing in. Don't leave. You just guess an answer. Maybe you'll roll the die and get it. All right. Let me collect it or correct it. Vinny? Vinny? Oh, good picture. Who's that?
I spelled it wrong, but I know about it.
Ah, I get one. P-A-O-U. Yeah, very good. Frog, in Egyptian numbers, frog was like 500. That was the Egyptian number 500 was a frog. You got to admit, that's pretty cool.
Was it Egypt where there was a plague of frogs?
Mm-hmm.
Dude, we should bring that back.
Probably not related. Let's go through this real quick. What were the Tories?
They were old white dudes. Conservative,
Old wealth,
white dudes.
conservatives, the country gentry. Yeah. Who are the militia?
The Paxton boys.
Paxton boys. Paxton boys. Who were the, what do you call the value of money? What happened to it?
Deflation.
Deflation, or the value went up. What happened to prices if the value goes up? Prices go down.
There was a depression.
If there's inflation, what do prices do? Go up, because the value of money goes down. It is general to have some kind of inflation. So even really low inflation today, like we have right now, is technically kind of like deflation. And if we go to full-fledged deflation, it's like a catastrophe. And we're on the edge. Doesn't mean we'll go over the edge, but this is the situation right now. On that happy note, let me go to the next one. Who reports the boycott?
Sons of Liberty.
Sons of Liberty, good. What was the law? What was the law?
Rates of assist.
Navigation.
Navigation Act. The Trade and Navigation Act. They kept bringing those laws back. Writs of assistance is just a blanket search warrant. It's a big deal. But most effective policy?
Boycott.
Yeah, which I kind of gave you a hint on for, didn't I? And lastly, what was the name of the Sassy Boys? Which, a great boy band, huh? So that they hack together the way they do music today. Producers just stick stuff together. All right, let's go take your notes out. Yeah. It should be all current, or it's Tall Bucks, Tea Party. Good. Got it. Sorry. That's all we need. I just need to see that you get it. Now, be careful you don't just write down gibberish or what I wrote. Good. Very good. Thank you. Make sure you add a little bit more than what I'm simply saying, or simply writing on the PowerPoint, or I always embellish. Make sure you get words, because it's easy to forget things if you just write down one word. But you write down a couple, not only will it become easier to remember, but also when you go back, you know what you're talking about. When you write it down, you thought about it, it sticks in there somewhere. So we got, that's some weird,
Right there.
right there. Hope this is filming. There are some people watching. Nobody seems to be complaining online, so it appears as though I'm here.
How many people?
Nobody liked it. Why don't you like it? So, with that, the first Continental Congress. Oh, so backtrack. The Tea Act. The Tea Act and the protesters against the Tea Act. The protesters against it. They weren't angry about the tax so much. What were they angry about?
Losing control.
Yeah, it was control, and what do we call the thing that they gave the East India? Yeah, they were mad at monopolies, and don't forget that. You hear people say that all the time, there's anger over the tax. In fact, you hear the thing about the Tea Act being about the tax. It was not the tax.
It's funny how we got so mad at monopolies, and then currently the United States allows monopolies to exist and continue.
We're controlled by monopolies.
Yeah, exactly. I just think it's
And ironically, what happened to the price? Because you're exactly right. What happened to the price of tea? And actually, the short run got lower, but it drove other businesses out. It would, even if the prices don't necessarily go up, it will hurt people's pockets. Monopolies cause either they raise the prices too much or they cause deflation because they don't. If there's only one person buying and selling things,
Charge whatever
they can charge and or force their their supply chain, their suppliers of goods, to pay lower or to take lower pay. Walmart does this. Amazon is infamous for doing this. Amazon is a monopoly by all definition, and we are dominant by it. They're against the law, but you got to enforce the law. We don't. This is America. Okay, so next. So that was a big deal, the Tea Act. Oh, and who was happy they followed up with the coercive acts or the intolerable acts? Who was like, yes?
The Patriots.
Those who wanted break with Britain or more of a break. Not clear what that meant yet. They were like, told you so. See, this is exactly what they did. Britain fell into the trap. Fell into the trap. And at the Boston Massacre, who defended the soldiers? Yeah, John Adams, a leading patriot. So let's go and get to, because of the Intolerable Act, the colonies are now unified, and in Philadelphia, they would meet 12 of the 13. Do you remember what state did not send?
Georgia.
Georgia, because what's Georgia?
The slaves.
Alligators.
Oh, yeah. That's
Nothing but alligators. And the city of Savannah. Just filled to the brim with alligators. Anyone been to Savannah?
I tried to avoid
I've been,
Georgia.
you know.
You been there? How long ago do you remember?
Like a year ago.
Did you like it?
Yeah.
Savannah's, I think, one of the most amazing towns in the United States. It blew me away how cool Savannah was.
All right.
Except the Savannah River is filled to the brim with alligators. Did you see it?
Yeah,
You're walking above the river and there's alligators going by. Just a few feet away. And if alligators close, it's like 20 feet long. They're close.
Alligators are scared.
And they can run over 1,000 miles an hour.
Oh, okay. For a minute I believed.
Actually, they're about 30. They're fast. That's almost as fast as us. A lot faster. So with that, 12 of the 13 colonies, and Suffolk, where the Massachusetts Assembly met when they were banned from Boston, they were kicked out. They met there. And they did a resolution. Now, this is not a law. This is saying that these are principles that we stand for. Oh, this is Carpenter's Hall where they met. Independence Hall, what it's known as today, is literally would be like right here in that picture. It was being constructed. This is a really cool building. The day I took this, it was a sunny day. Then like overnight, the clouds came in. And I thought, oh God, more rain. Then the clouds left. But this is the U.S. Revolutionary War Army Museum right here. My wife and I walked down and saw the door was open right there. So we walked in. All the lights were off. I thought, geez, this is weird. But you could still see there were the lights behind the exhibitions, and a few people followed in. We're walking around. And then a park ranger came running in because it's part of the National Park Service. And they said, you have to leave. This is closed. So that's why I broke into the Army Museum. Okay, so with that, Monday, a lot of times museums are closed. So they began a boycott. The Continental Association, or the association, wouldn't enforce it, but that's the Sons of Liberty. It's trying to give it a more formal name. And, that's the inside of Carpenter's Hall, right there. They also began to organize their militia. There had always been militia, but the thing about the militia on the coast, and areas that had less of a threat of the two big threats that militia were really created for, especially after the French were gone. Attacked by American Indians or slave rebellions. Around Boston, let's say, there weren't that many slaves, there wasn't a threat of American Indian attack, and the militias had become basically drinking clubs. Well, men would get together, they'd drink rum, walk around. They couldn't really fire their weapons because they didn't have enough powder to spare. Most of them didn't know how to shoot. And so they just kind of wander around, and they were at a club. They tried to organize it better, even including storing powder just in case. Next. The suffix resolves have this, but the Continental Congress would put out a Declaration of Rights and Grievances. And what they said is Parliament had taken away their rights. And they laid out how they took away their rights. They were still loyal to the king, the Continental Congress. As they looked at it, it was Parliament. But we are Englishmen. And we're loyal to the king. The vast majority of the people at the Continental Congress wanted to remain in the empire. What we now call revolution did not quite exist in most of their minds. Some were pushing, but most just wanted more self-rule. The word would be autonomy. That's what they wanted. And then they said, we'll meet again in May 1775. Sound good? They went home for the winter. And during the winter, Boston, there's a regiment there for the Quartering Act, or with the Quartering Act from the Intolerable Acts. They're in there. They made a couple of sorties, like a company of 100 or so men would go out to try to capture the militia weapons. They were unsuccessful. But when spring hit, the British decided to act. So, this happened fall, going to winter, now spring, 1775, and we're coming to April 19th, 1775. And this will be lumped together as the battles of Lexington and Concord. For some reason, I have this up here, and I don't know why, but I'm leaving it because I like it. And Lexington and Concord, there are over 1,000 troops in Boston, British troops, about 7 companies. A good hunk of those men are going to march out. Now, they wore their red uniforms. Almost all of them, all the infantry had red uniforms. Some wore green. A lot of cavalry wore green. Remember I told you how they just had to have bright colored uniforms? And it was an unusually hot night when they marched. The plan was to march all night and surprise the colonists early or late morning in Concord. It was about a 19-mile march. Here's Boston. Some will go by boat, some will march overland, go along this single road. It's pretty rugged terrain. If you ever go to Boston, go on this road. It's the exact road still, Patriots Road, and it's really pretty. Once you get out of town, Boston's insane to drive it, just insane. Like hell, just crazy. But once you get out, here. So the plan was march in their nice red uniforms. By the way, what are their red uniforms made out of? What cloth?
Wool.
Yeah, wool. Wool's durable, thick, perfect for warm weather, right? Because it keeps the heat out. That's science. Don't forget that. When you take a long run, say, I'm going to go run 5 miles in a hot summer day. What do you wear?
Wool.
Just wear wool. Just cover yourself with wool.
Sheep. Get it fresh off the sheep.
Yeah, look at sheep. They always are comfortable. So that, no matter the weather, you never hear a sheep complain. Thank you. I was hoping somebody would bow. They also want to get the weapons that are stockpiled at the limited powder at Concord, but also arrest Sam Adams and John Hancock. Both leading patriots. We know who Adams is. Hancock was a smuggler. I'm sorry, a merchant. And he got rich, and the British policy hurt him. That's how he became a patriot. And he was not considered to be the sharpest tack, outside of being a good pirate, but he had money. So he's important.
And a nice stick.
And they were here. The plan was to arrest them. They're going to make a statement. This is illegitimate. The British government's in charge. Now, they're ready. They're ready. Paul Revere and William Dawes were on a rotation. They would have different men ready to be outriders to ride out and warn the militia. Younger militia that were ready to go at a moment's notice would be known as the Minutemen. And so the idea is that riders would warn them if British soldiers were on the march and they could come out. No, we're not clear what they would do. I mean, what are they going to do if the British do march out? Are they going to fight them? That was not clear. That's a problem. So, William Dawes rode here. Revere rode here. And what did they yell as they rode? By the way, that's supposed to be Revere. That's Statue of Revere in Boston. You ever heard the British are coming? The British are coming. That's from a poem. We all say it. I think of it first. But actually, no. You know why? Yeah, so it'd be like, here we come. We're coming. We are on the way. No, it said on our way. So, they probably yelled, the redcoats are coming. Or the regulars. Regular means not militia. Regular trained soldiers. That's probably what they yelled. And they did warn them. Hancock and Adams were able to escape. The Minutemen, so militia came running out, grabbed their muskets. They had a limited amount of powder. Most of them had brown bess muskets. I mentioned those smoothbore muskets before. That were accurate to a range of well over 15 feet, about 50 yards. And they didn't know how to fire them. I mean, they're pretty ramshackle. The British gave them those weapons for protection. They came running out and they went to Lexington. The British plan, march to Lexington, cook breakfast, then march to Concord. All the Minutemen came marching here. I should add that the Minutemen beat them by about 3 hours because Revere and Dawes were on horseback. And so they're way ahead. And so they warned them, the Minutemen got there. Before we get to that, I should add, why do we know Revere so well? Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. You don't need to know this for the test. I just put it up there just to remind you. He wrote a poem about 40 years after, and The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. And that made Paul Revere famous. If you go to Boston, there's Paul Revere stuff everywhere. Now, most of it's kind of silly, but they did preserve his home and his shop. And that's really cool. That's, wow. I mean, you really do feel like you're walking into the 18th century. The Park Service does amazing work, especially with limited amount of money, and that's a good example of it. One if by land, two if by sea. Okay, so on Lexington Green, for some reason, I kept this covered. The green is a big commons field. The militia would practice. The militia came running out there to this field. But when they got there, this is supposed to be the field when the battle hit, it was pitch black. They got there, and they really believed the British must be there, British soldiers must be there burning down the town. And they got there, there's nothing. Well, we're up. So what did they do? They went to the nearest tavern. There's a tavern right there. Now, a tavern, you might be thinking about a place just to drink, but it's also where you eat. They would have room for travelers to stay. Just because it's kind of all. But they went there and had breakfast, and their breakfast was hot buttered rum. So they started to drink. Like, oh God, that was scary. Well, nothing's happening. And, you know, hey, nobody cared what time it was in the 18th century. Nobody cared. You worked when you wanted to work. You didn't work when you didn't want to work. Which, by the way, would be kind of nice, wouldn't it? We're so trained to do the opposite, it's weird. All of you look at the clock, right? In fact, when I say that, you just did, or somebody like, oh, this is done. Even if you like it here, you're still like, right? You're all trained. That's a relatively new thing in human history. That was eaten into us, literally. Back to this. So they're drinking, trying to relax, trying to recover, going to go head back to their farms or wherever, and the British arrive. Tired, upset, and hungry. The British are going to stop at this field and cook breakfast. And out poured the militia. And they just kind of stumbled onto the field, this irregular line, just as the sun's coming up. And the British are like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. The soldiers are furious and hungry. By the way, that's the statue that's there. The very noble Minuteman. But it was not quite like that. The British lined up and said, basically, move it, you damn rebels. And the rebels said they would stay. After the fact, the saying was, their commander, stand your ground. Don't fire unless fired upon, but if they mean to have a war, let it begin here. And that's kind of like the legend. It's there at Lexington. Probably not. It's a good thing like after the fact. Boy, we should have said this. And the British are mad. Somebody was going to open fire over, I think probably shoot a volley over their head. Once they fired, some militia fired back, and next thing you know, a number of militia are killed, and then the rest ran away. And that was the opening shots of the Revolutionary War. The militia ran away. By the way, you get one group tired and hungry, meaning one group tired and half drunk. Not a good way to start a confrontation. That is a recipe for disaster. So then the soldiers marched. What?
Don't go to war drunk. Right? That's a good expression.
At least not all of you. Okay, so with that, then they marched on the Concord. Now, riders from Lexington had already made it to Concord and said, they're going to open fire. So the people in Concord have no idea. And a couple thousand militia showed up there. Here's their statue at Concord. And there would be a sharp fight at a bridge outside. This is the bridge, what it looks like. Well, this is about 15 years ago. But a sharp fight at North Bridge, where the British were going to go over the bridge and surround the city of Concord and then burn down the supplies. Here's a watercolor from a wood engraving from a British manuscript from 1775. And there'd be a sharp fight, and General Gage realized it's not worth it, and our men still haven't eaten, and so they turned around and started marching back home. And so Concord, the militia at least somewhat stood and fought. If you go there today, it is still bitter between Lexington and Concord. You go to Lexington, because you go to Lexington first, driving outside of Boston, and in Lexington, they're like, this is where the war began. This is where we fought. This is where we stood up to the British. And you're like, yeah, okay, that's fine. You get to Concord, they say the opposite. So when my wife and I, there the first time, we're driving down this road, really, God, it really is pretty to drive. Massachusetts is a pretty state, you know. But you get out and you get to Concord, and we were what's called hungry. And so we stopped at a restaurant. And this was at a time you could like do things like go into restaurants. But we went into a restaurant, and we had someone to seat us. And, you know, obviously we're tourists. I mean, there are tourists all over the place. And she looked at us and said, oh, well, yeah, Lexington. And I said, yeah, it was really neat. And she goes, I mean, don't listen to what they say. They ran away. Concord is where the war began because we stood and fought. Okay. I agree. 100%. I thought that was really funny. Well, it's kind of cute. But the retreat. And the British marched back, and thousands. I've seen figures as high as 10,000. That seems way too high, but maybe 4,000 militiamen eventually came along this long 19-mile road, and all along there were little fights where the militiamen would hide behind trees and take pot shots at the British lines. And then as the British would form and try to push them out, what would the militia do? Just run away. Incredibly frustrating. You don't need to know the exact numbers, except just the British. They took a lot of casualties, didn't they? 700 men and 273 would be killed or wounded or missing. Some deserted. Now the British buried their soldiers where they fell. And so these are markers for British soldiers all along this road. And the road today is a part of the national park. The road goes, and the Park Service meticulously takes care of them. These are other Revolutionary War battlefields. They just, I just wanted to get a picture of that. And then they put the Union Jack there. This was actually, they're doing it in preparation because it was spring break, and they do a big reenactment the weekend before April 19th, so that's why they had the flag up. So a bloody fight. The British were humiliated and now stuck in Boston. They lost a lot of men. And this is going to begin the siege of Boston. Let's see if you can guess what word this is. The siege of Boston. The militia don't have heavy weapons. They don't have artillery. They can't drive them out. But the British don't have enough troops now to drive them out from the heights that surround Boston. This is all hilly area. And you'll notice Boston has this peninsula with a really narrow isthmus right there. It's really shocking. This is Charles Island. It's not like that today. These hills are almost all gone. Laborers with wheelbarrows took the hill and dumped it into this water and made land. So all this is now land pretty much. So to get from here to here, you just kind of walk like that. So the peninsula doesn't stick out near as much as it used to. And this is a picture of supposedly the Colonial tents. It's really hard to tell, but that's supposed to be Boston. And here's an old map of Boston. Good map. But Boston does not look like that today. We'll come back to that, but while that's going on, this is April. Meanwhile, Philadelphia. Who's supposed to come back in May of 1775? The Continental Congress. Huh? You went to, Independence Hall? So Carpenter's Hall, where they first met, this is behind it. So Carpenter's Hall, this picture would be like right here. Isn't it cool?
It is.
Did you take the tour?
Yeah, there were a few things that were closing under construction, but yeah, we did.
Oh, when you were there, did they have this all covered?
I can't remember. It was their like freshman summer.
If you get a chance, go to Philadelphia. It's a cool town. That's where I saw my first mugging.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It was really exciting.
It's a first for everything.
Yeah, I know. It's one thing. We don't get enough muggings around here.
Have you ever
We just
been
really
mugged?
don't.
Or
Huh?
Have you ever been mugged? or
No,
just-
I haven't been mugged, but I saw it.
You should get mugged one time.
I should.
I was mugged. It was pretty fun.
You were mugged, really?
I was.
Where?
San Fran.
Townsend?
San Fran. I don't think there's many muggers in
Really? Oh, I'm sorry. It's pretty scary. Yeah, it was what I saw was a woman get her purse snatched. And then guy ran. In fact, my wife and I were walking, and we saw like commotion, and then this guy runs right past us. Yeah, he's just like, what? Like literally that fast. And he's like, just running past, and the guy yells, stop him! And it's like, sorry.
Okay.
What do you want me to do? He was fast, gone. By the way, let me tell you the temperature that day when I was there. It was 100 degrees. It was about 6:30 at night, 100 degrees, and the humidity was 103.
Oh, mugging at that temperature. That's cold.
It was record heat. You know what the low was that night? 91.
Sweet.
Yeah. Sweet. It's so awesome. I love that feeling like you never cool down. Now you wonder why I keep my room cold. So with that, the Second Continental Congress. This would become the de facto government of the United States. They met just a few weeks after. And when they started coming into Philadelphia, they all knew about Lexington and Concord. So only the most radical people were there. And please put that down. Only the patriots. I mean, these are real, well, I'll explain it more tomorrow, but patriots were there. Those who were reluctant, they didn't go. And all 13 colonies sent people. And one of the first things they did is they decided to take that rabble, because it was unorganized militia with no real structure, and they created a Continental Alarm. I got to be clear about it. Just by them saying it's the Continental Alarm, it did not make them an army. But eventually, this would be the creation of it. So 1775 is the creation of the Army. A little bit later, they create a Navy out of nothing. Navy has to have soldiers on board, and so that's where you get naval infantry or Marines. The Air Force was really small then. We didn't have many planes yet. But there was a Space Force. No. George Washington was chosen as the commander, and he immediately rode up to Boston. Washington went there basically, this, him appointed. That's not at all what George Washington looked like. This is a lithograph from the 1840s. Look at Washington. That's from Weems's painting that's on the dollar bill from the 1790s. You see a lot of pictures of Washington where he always has that same look as an elderly woman. So, remember what I told you, how they draw paintings back then. Washington showed up in his blue militia uniform and strutted around wanting to be the commander. He really wanted it. And he looked like a commander. He carried himself very well. He was stoic. He knew how to act like a gentleman. We already talked about this. And he was tall. He was about 6'2". And the average height was a little bit shorter than today. And so since he was taller than most of them, I was like, oh, he must have a commanding presence, which, as silly as that is, a lot of people follow that. But John Adams of Massachusetts was like, let's go to Washington. And you might wonder, why did Adams from Massachusetts choose somebody who was from what colony was Washington from? Virginia to lead troops. The only army, the only members of the army was the militia around Boston. Why choose a Virginian to lead Massachusetts? Militia. Okay, I put down unity so you can guess that. This is what you have to get down. Adams knew they could never win without Virginia. Virginia was the biggest and the richest of the colonies. So here's a very stylized picture of Washington writing in. Trust me, he did not write in as like, Washington's here. Everyone's like, who's this guy? And he wrote up there, and on that happy note, the bell rang. Oh, the Declaration of Independence is in the appendix of the textbook, A67. It's really short, but the first couple paragraphs, please read. Just go through it. It's really short. It's amazing how important of a document that is and how short it is. So, you didn't watch Thursday? So you didn't watch both of these, although it's a green note. We got Wednesday. What did you have to know? Monday, Tuesday that we were working with last Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah, I tried to get as much work as I could, but my English is crazy. There's like 7 assignments that are due already.
Sorry about that.
And then I tried to catch up with your class and then another class and then another class, but it's kind of hard to catch up with all at the same time.
Well, remember, I do, the class time I broadcast.
Right.
So, it's just 40 minutes.
But it's also because I really haven't set a routine as much as I should have, so it's not